Hi, everybody. It's Bob Ost, and so this is the TRU Community Gathering. It's Friday. It's October 13th. It's Friday the 13th, and I defy I defy Friday the 13th because I feel lucky today because I have Kristin Marting and Robert Lyons as my guests today. So forget the unlucky Friday 13th. This is a great day for us. I want you to know that this is our 177th consecutive Friday community gathering. We started doing them April 17th in 2020 as a response to COVID. The community was all confused about how to move forward and what to do, and we were in isolation. And I opened up this Zoom room, this lovely Zoom room that you're all welcome to be in right now. And we started immediately, like with the first time we did it, we had 30 people in the room, and we've had anywhere from 25 to 90 people every week joining us. The idea was originally to provide a haven for people who were feeling isolated due to COVID, and to have conversations about theater. While we're here in the room, we might as well learn something. So I have been bringing in guests for 176 consecutive weeks of conversations about various aspects. Originally, we're talking about alternate ways of making theater happen since we couldn't do it live, and we talked about radio theater. We talked about all sorts of things. We talked about street theater for a while because there was a time when during this when street theater was actually possible, when it wasn't possible for us to do stuff in an actual venue. And gradually we've finally survived. I know it's late to say this, but I try to keep saying it. Let's pat ourselves on the back for getting through 3 years of quarantine. Lord knows it wasn't easy, and I think a lot of us triumphed during COVID. It was a kind of my theory on it was God telling us to go to our rooms and think about what we've done. And in some ways that happened for a lot of us. We actually did have time to think and did have time to look at what was really going on in our world and in our country. And I think are at a point right now where a lot of us would like to see things be a little bit better. And we also know that change is happening very slowly. So we're out of COVID, but we still have COVID. We're not out of COVID. We have plenty of COVID, actually. I had COVID July 1st. That was my 4th time. So we actually have lots of COVID, but we're a lot safer now, and it's not as dangerous as it was. So our conversations are coming back to live theater, and we've talked about the return to live theater and various aspects of that. Today, we're going to talk to two, I don't know if they consider themselves, but they really are legends of downtown theater. They are people that actually helped define downtown theater for many generations, for generations of us. I want to bring them into the room. I want you to meet them. They're Kristin Marting, who is the creator and founder and executive director. What's your title? I don't have the titles in front of me.
I'm the founding artistic director of Here, but I founded it with 3 other people. So I'm a co-founder of Here.
Co-founder, yeah, co-founder. And Robert, you created something called Ohio Theater, which became New Ohio Theater. Both of your origin stories include real estate, which is unique and something that doesn't happen to everybody who goes into our business. So I'm going to ask you to tell us a little bit about the history of your companies. I'm gonna let me go with Robert first. I don't know, Robert. Kristin, you and I have known each other for a long time, just a long time at this point. So I don't know you, Robert. How do you do? It's nice to meet you. Hello.
Hi, good to meet you. Hi.
So tell us about.
I'm happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Ohio, what it is, what it was, what it became. And just give us a little bit of the background of the story.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Well, yeah, of course. I think the Ohio Theater actually existed as a theater on Worcester Street before I got there, but it had been closed by the fire department, and was sitting dormant right around the same time I came to New York, which was like 1987. And the production that reopened the space, I was hired on as a production manager, and through that, I met the guy who owned the building, Bill Hahn. And I said, Bill, what's going on with your theater? Like, who's running your theater? And he said, well, nobody's running it right now. And I said, well, I could do that. And he said, okay, well, let's try it for a year.
Okay, so
And
immediately, I have to
we
ask you the
shook
question.
hands.
I have to ask you the question. Why did you think you could do that? None of us would ever say, give me a theater. I know how to do that. Why? What was your background? How did you know?
I had been knocking around in the theater for about, I was late to theater, actually. I had probably started, it was after I was out of college, so I was probably 23 or something. And, but I had been knocking around, well, like some people have been doing it since high school or college. I didn't do it in either of those.
Okay, I wrote my first play when I was 14. Okay, you got me.
Yeah, okay, so that's a little different. But I'm a playwright first and foremost, and so I really entered the theater through that portal. That was what I was interested in. That's what I was doing. But at the same time, I took, I started as an ASM. I worked as a stage manager. I worked as a production stage manager. I learned how to design lights and sound. I was knocking around with this company called Project 3, and I started writing grants. So it was really pretty much just a self-taught process. But by the time I hit Bill, of course, I was also 27, and you kind of think you can do anything if somebody gives you the opportunity. And so I said that.
Just have to tell you, I wouldn't have had the nerve. So I want you to know that what you did was extraordinary. To come to this guy and say, I can take over this building. I can run this theater. Crazy. It's crazy, but you did it.
It was a little crazy. He was crazy. Bill Hahn, he himself was kind of crazy, and so it was a good match. And I just started running the theater, making it up as I went along and learning as fast as I could. So it really is a real estate story in that sense. And just to segue with Kristin here, I met Kristin in probably 98. No, right? Well, yeah, 80, no, 80, 89.
88.
So
88.
So the year after I took over the theater, Kristin walked in right out of NYU with a lot of big ideas and a lot of big plans for theater. And I was like, great, thank you. I love this. And so we've known each other since then. She had a company called Tiny Mythic, and they did, I don't know how many seasons you did with us, Kristin, 4 or 5?
5 seasons before here, yeah.
Right. So we've known each other pre-here.
So just one or two more questions before we talk about here, the origin story of here. So you came into the building, what it had been the Ohio Theater, and it was on hiatus. How did you become the person that resuscitated the Ohio Theater, other than the real estate? I mean, there's more to it than real estate. You have to have a structure. You have to have people. You have to have a 501c3, or if you were not for profit.
Right. So yeah, that kind of stuff I had to do, and I learned how to do the business side of it. But for people who never saw the Ohio Theater, it was this big, beautiful 5,000-foot warehouse space with big barn doors that opened onto the street, and artists loved it because it had tremendous character and just a certain vibe and a certain sense of possibility. And I was very lucky about that. So very quickly, I put out the word, like, I'm looking for shows to put in this theater. And that's really, it was that response. It was just the people came, and they, like Kristin and other people.
You do know how amazing that is, don't you? No,
I guess so, yeah.
you never thought of it. It's like, oh, I'll just put out a call for artists to come in and use this space. And you made a company. You made a company. You
Yeah.
was it originally called, did you originally call it New Ohio, or was it still Ohio and then you rebranded it when you moved to another space?
It was Ohio until we moved to Christopher Street. So eventually, the real estate story, they eventually sold the building in 2010, I think. And I thought that was the end, and went to 3LD, went to residency at 3LD for 1 year, and then the space opened up on Christopher.
Three-leg dog, is that right?
Three-legged dog. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Kevin Cunningham threw me a lifeline. And then when we moved to Christopher Street, I couldn't call it Ohio Theater on Christopher Street because the space was so specific and so iconic that didn't make sense. But I did want to bring the history with me, so I called it New Ohio, and that's.
So I want to come back to this, and now I want to talk about the real estate stories, and then I want to come back and talk about what you called the vibe. I want to talk about what the vibe is. What is the vibe that you guys, that's part of your aesthetic? What is it that makes your shows? Because there's kind of we have a sense of what a downtown show. I don't even know if you consider yourself, you're called Downtown Legends. I mean, if you read about you guys, you're called Downtown Legends. You may not even think of yourselves in that way, but we'll talk about that. Kristin, tell us about here, and tell us about Tiny Mythic first, and how that turned into a theater space.
Yeah, well, Tiny Mythic was founded right out of college. We were all like 21 and 22 years old. There were 4 of us. We were 3 directors and 1 performer. And our focus as a company was basically to provide directors with space and to support seasons of directors' work. Instead of picking plays, picking directors we wanted to work with and making seasons that way. So it was a different thought. And I was 21 when I walked into Robert's office, and I was like, hey, we want to do a season in your theater. And he said, yes. And we did 3 shows in our first season. We did, what was it? Dream Play, Casimir and Carolina by Odon von Horvath. It was the US premiere of that work from the 30s in Germany. And Icarus, a new version of Icarus that overlapped with the Challenger. And we were doing immersive.
Wasn't it Alice in Wonderland? Was that not the first year?
Alice in Wonderland was a production I directed there, but not a Tiny Mythic show. That was in the fall of '88 before that.
Okay.
Yeah, so I directed that show. Alice in Wonderland was the first one, which was, I was just going to say, like, we were doing immersive work before it was called immersive work. At that time, it was called environmental theater when you went into a space and there wasn't audience seats and the audience moved around, and it wasn't called immersive and participatory, but that's what we were doing back then. And the Ohio was an incredible space for that. You could do so many things with that space. It was amazing. So it's sorely missed. That theater on Wooster Street. So we worked there for 5 years. And during that time, we started our American Living Room Festival, which was one of New York City's first summer festivals. And it was started just as directors. And we just went to Robert because the theater was empty in the summer. And we're like, hey, can we do some stuff on Saturday nights in the theater since it's dark? And he's like, it's not air conditioned, but go ahead. So we did, and it was $5 to get in, and you could see 3 different shows. And that expanded over the 5 years to include a performance series, a music lounge, a puppet parlor, and a film and video salon. So it had different nights with different approaches. And then when we started here, we moved that festival over to here. And we worked at the Ohio for 5 years, and it really put our company on the map, and we loved working there. And Robert kindly let us manage the rehearsal space upstairs, and we got an office out of that and we were able to rehearse our shows there. So there was a good synchronicity. Robert and I collaborated on projects together and have continued to do so up to the present. So it was the beginning of a long creative relationship as well that Robert and I have had, which has been fun. But then we thought, oh, we want our own space because we want to do more with the space. So we got together with another company, Home for Contemporary Theater and Art, that had a space on Walker Street, and they had lost it. And we kept seeing spaces that were too large for us alone. So we finally realized, oh, let's go in with somebody else. So there were going to be 3 companies going in together, but it just ended up being the 2 of us. And we rented the space where here still is. on 6th Avenue, just south of Spring Street. At that time, it was 13,000 square feet, and we did 3 theaters, a gallery, and a cafe. And we opened that space in the fall of, we're actually almost to the 30th anniversary. It was October 28th of 1993. And at that time we rented, but then we had the opportunity, the building was converting, and we had the opportunity to purchase the space in 2005, which we did with support from the city. And then we did a big renovation, and we changed our footprint so that now we're here the way we look now, where we're just 2 theaters and a gallery, cafe area that's more informal. And so we
wasn't there a
space.
Ferris wheel or a merry-go-round? Wasn't there some story about something that was in that space? I don't know. Maybe I'm confused.
What did you say?
There's something in that. I remember something in that space that. Anyway, well, I'm probably misremembering it. So let me ask you this: what was here when you originally started calling your company here, and has that evolved into something slightly different?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we were 2 companies that founded the space, but we brought other companies in, and our idea was to be organizationally collaborative. So when we started, we had 10 companies, our 2 founding companies, and 8 guest companies that were working with us. And we had a financial model for how everyone paid for the theater that totally didn't work and put us in debt. So we had to reconceive a different way of making it work. And so we did that. The 2 founding companies decided to merge to be one entity, because we all had, like, Tiny Mythic had its mission and Home had its mission, and the other companies that were in residence had their missions. So we merged into one entity in about 97. We ran non-hierarchically also. There was no leader of the organization. There were 4 of us that founded it, and then we were having monthly meetings with all the companies that were in residence to make decisions and stuff. So it was a very unusual model. But we had, we just lost you.
No. I just tried to change. Oh, I lost my background. Okay, sorry.
You changed.
I tried to move, and it didn't work.
Okay.
There we are.
There's your background.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Anyway, that's kind of and then what we've done since we merged is we founded a program called the Here Artist Residency Program, and we've done that now for about 30 years. And it's a program that supports artists from inception through work in progress, workshop, and then we fully premiere the work and help launch it on tour. And it's a multi-year program. The artists are in residence with us for 2 to 3 years. And it's $100,000 commitment to each project on selection, $50,000 in cash, and $50,000 in space, equipment, and services. And then we raise the rest of the money needed for the projects, because most of the projects, the budgets range. We might have budgets that are like 200,000, and we might have budgets that go up to like 800,000. So it's a range of stuff that happens in the HARP program. But that's our core program. Here's unusual. We're a producer, we're a presenter, and we're a venue. So we wear all those hats. And so we collaborate with artists in different ways, depending what role we're working with them on. And I guess the only other thing I would add that is really significant in Here's trajectory is that we co-founded the Prototype Festival 12 years ago with Beth Morrison Projects, which is a citywide opera and music theater festival. And we do some of the activities at Here, but the majority of the activities are at larger venues than Here. Here is kind of the smallest venue in that partnership. And then as a venue, we bring artists in from the New York City area primarily, but sometimes national and international artists.
So let me just tell you that we got a lot of writers in our community, a lot of writers. We have producers. I mean, obviously we're a producers organization, but we have writers, and we've been doing these conversations every Friday. And I've had writers come to me and say, I don't really write commercial. And we'd given an impression, I suppose, in some of our meetings that we were thinking that the be all and end all was commercial theater, and it's not. I mean, basically, we support everything from commercial theater to off Broadway, off Broadway showcase, anything, small theater as well. So they're always saying they want to meet people that don't expect commercial work from them. So can you tell us a little bit about your aesthetic as it was when you first started out, and whether anything's changed? And I know it's a hard question. It's because I know that you probably have an aesthetic that you could talk about, but then you could think of like 15 different examples of things that didn't fit into that. But in general, what is it you look for in work, in new work that you want to support?
Was that to me?
Either one of you. Yeah. We'll start with Robert.
I think for us it was a lot about just alternative storytelling strategies and getting out of strictly dramatic structure, traditional dramatic structure, and opening up different ways that a theater can hold the stage, and that a story can hold the stage other than strictly dramatic structure. Although to your point, I love, I write dramatic structure sometimes, and I do all that too. But
well, I think
that was a big part of it.
What you said basically does the heart good of many of the writers that are part of our community. I mean, they are frustrated because they often are looking for alternative ways of telling stories, and they always say, "Where do I go?" I've been sending people. I've been suggesting the kitchen. I've been suggesting Brick. But how do they bring a piece to here, Kristin? And we're going to talk about the fact there's going to be transitions happening in the next year. But other than that, how do they bring something to here, and what kind of thing fits the vibe? We'll go back to the word that you were using earlier, Robert, the vibe of your company and your theater.
Yeah, I mean, we are interested in hybrid forms. If you're doing what I call a play, here is not the place for that. That's not what our focus is. We're much more interested in pushing the envelope in terms of experimentation and in terms of, I guess, scale and thoughtfulness. I mean, I think that it's multidisciplinary work is what we're interested in. The artists that we work with, we think of as pushing the envelope aesthetically. We think about risk taking in terms of form and content. A lot of the work that we tend to do, it has stuff that is in relationship to the world that we're living in right now, and commenting and thinking about who we are as humans and how we're traveling through this world right now. So that's just something that we're very interested in, socially relevant and resonant work. But we don't take play submissions. We take applications to our HEART program for projects that don't already exist. So what we're looking for is a concept piece of what the piece is that you want to develop, and past work samples of work that you've done. And you need to have video to be competitive, because our program is really focused on multidisciplinary work, which doesn't just communicate through a script. So a lot of the submissions that come in are for previous presentations that folks have done in excerpted form or whatever. It doesn't have to be the full video. We ask for 10 minutes. And it could be 5 minutes from one piece and 5 minutes from another. But we do an open call for submissions every year. The deadline is usually February 1st or 2nd, whatever is hitting on a weekday. And we ask the people who apply to suggest people to serve on the selection panel. And so the whole panel is chosen by the artists who are applying to the program to reduce gatekeeping and increase access. And then we hold panels for the different applicant pools. And then there's a finalist group that gets advanced to the artistic leadership of the organization, which is myself and Amanda Siglowski and Remy Harris, the three of us. I'm the artistic director and they're the associate artistic directors currently, but that's changing when I leave. So yeah, so that's and for HERP, we usually get a couple hundred applications and we usually accept 2 or 3. But if an artist already has a piece that exists and they have some people that they work with, or if part of a theater company, or they have a producer that they're partnered with, you can apply to our sublet series program to self-produce in our space at a subsidized rate. And so we do have self-producing partnerships. It's not the same as our HEART program with us producing it, but we work as a venue that presents you in our space. So that's the other way that we work with artists.
And what can I tell all my writer friends who say, I don't want to self-produce, I don't want to self-produce? We tell them, do it. We tell them, think about doing it. It really is helpful for your career.
Yeah, if it already exists, then that's the way to work with me. If it doesn't exist yet, you can apply to the HEART program if it's a hybrid work that fits some of those other parameters that I was just speaking about. Yeah.
I encourage everybody to self. I'm a writer. I don't know. I think you guys know a little bit about me, but I'm a playwright, composer, lyricist, and some of the best experiences I've had have been just producing myself, just saying, I'm tired of waiting for this to happen. I'm just gonna do it, and I get up and I do it. So that's what I've been encouraging other people to do as well. I hope I haven't caused too much problems for too many people by doing that. So Robert, let's talk about the vibe, the Ohio vibe, and what I know. Let's just
Well,
okay. The elephant in the
picking up.
room. The elephant in the
Well,
room
let me
is
just
when
pick up. Let me
we
pick
know
up
that both of you
Kristin
are
with-
retiring from your companies. We
Yeah.
I think I've let everybody know that. So there aren't opportunities for New Ohio right now, but back in the day, what were the opportunities that people had in terms of working with you?
I think I was going to say the thing that Kristin and I share, I think, an approach is we're more interested, or at the New Ohio, it was finding artists that we were interested in, and then asking them what they want to do next. It was kind of more the model. So rather than so it's not so much curating a product like this is a play and I think this play would be successful, or even that this is a play that's already been done somewhere else, but hasn't been done in New York yet. It was always really more like, oh, I've seen some work from this artist. It's interesting. You start a conversation. What's your next project? What are you doing? What can we do? How can I help you do that? So that was, I think, a similar approach. We had, and then we had a 2-year residency program, honestly, modeled off of Kristin and years. We had the summer festival for 30 years. We had a work in progress showing. We did the film festival. So we did a film festival that was specifically for New York indie theater artists. And that's actually been a big success for the last 6 years. And that program is continuing post New Ohio, and will happen in February at a location TBD. But I'm not producing that. Mark Weitz is the producer of that, and he's kind of taking that with him post Ohio. So, I think that's what we share is the idea of we're not really looking for a product to produce. We're really looking for artists to support.
So the opportunities still exist, Kristin, at here, even though both Robert and Kristin have decided to move on to. I mean, they're moving on. Here is going to stay. I think everybody knows this because from what I wrote in terms of what we're doing today, and Ohio is actually closing its doors unless somebody just appears out of nowhere and says, "Hey, I can take over that theater." Except there's no theater right now. But whether somebody would want to take over your brand is another question. Would you let anybody take over your brand?
No.
Okay.
That was kind of part of we are out of the space now. We left August 31st was our last day.
Right.
Just to put a little frame on it, the space was a set aside in the archive building, and will remain a theater, and is remaining a theater.
Anita Durst, I think, and Shishama is going to be involved in.
Shishama has taken on the lease to that space, and is working out their programming right now and how that space is going to work. So the fact that was true certainly took some of the sting out of closing the New Ohio, knowing that the space itself was going to continue, and as it turns out, into good hands. So that was that part of the decision. As far as closing the brand, it was really more. Melanie Joseph is who ran the Foundry, is a good friend and a longtime collaborator, and I watched very carefully when she closed the Foundry and how she did it and why she did it, and the idea that a organization might just have its own life cycle and doesn't have to go on forever, and that might be a natural thing. And it was through seeing how she handled that and conversations with her, kind of led me down the path of saying, I think that this is the life cycle of this organization and the decision to close that.
Would it be safe to say it wasn't an easy decision for you? Or it was, you were just, it's time, you just knew it was time?
Yeah, I'm a little older than Kristin, and so I'm also in a different, I'm in my own place in my life, in my own life cycle, not the institutional life cycle, my actual human life cycle.
Oh, that.
I've been doing it a long time. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of changes we know happening in the field, and it really, it felt like it was all coming together, and so it was hard, but not painful.
And your plan is you're going to continue in theater. You're just not going to be running the New Ohio. You're going to be directing.
That's correct. Yes, I'm actually keeping the underlying 501c3 is Soho think tank, which dates all the way back to the early days that we were talking about.
We didn't talk about that. So explain what the Soho think tank was.
Soho think tank was the not-for-profit that I created when I was given the opportunity to run the Ohio Theater. And that's been the institutional mechanism that I ran Ohio Theater and then New Ohio Theater. So we're closing New Ohio Theater, but I am maintaining the 501c3 with an eye towards some producing. I have a connection upstate, so I have this possibility of a program called Downtown Upstate, where we take shows from downtown and bring them up to the Hudson Valley. That's one conversation going on. I also have a couple of projects of my own that were in conversations to get My Onlyness, which was last year, over to Warsaw and Poland. And so there's different projects specific projects I'm continuing with myself.
Yes,
as a freelance artist, like everybody else.
You're active.
Yeah.
Kristin, I'm going to ask you about what informed your decision to move on to other things.
I feel like the field has had huge shifts in the last few years, and I've been part of that process. And I feel, I've been doing this almost 30 years. I feel like I've expressed what I want to express as an artistic leader, and that it's time to have other voices and other perspectives in the seat. And I'm excited to see where the place goes. I always want here to be fresh and adventurous and bold. And, I'm in my 50s, and I wanted to be sure that I didn't hold it back. I wanted to step away before they wanted me to step away. I also have a freelance directing career, which I've had to hold back on projects because of here. And it felt like a good time where I could do more work with that. I have like 4 projects in development that are going to be happening around the country. And I'm excited to make those works. And I also have felt like, there's things that I really believe in. I've always been an activist in the artistic work that I've done. And I've also done actual actions on the streets, like the world's longest unemployment line, in collaboration with a bunch of different people, and different actions like that were art actions. And I'm really interested in how to have an impact on things that happen in our world. And so I'm going to be doing some work in politics. I've been serving on a community board for like about the last 5-6 years. I've been working like the last year with the state assembly member in my district, doing legislative strategy work. So I'm just kind of interested to see where I can take things as an artist and also as an activist. So yeah, and I'll be happy to be lifted from the weight of, being responsible for 15 people's salaries, for fundraising a huge amount of money, for every time there's a rainstorm or is my building flooded. Like, I'll be happy to be freed from those responsibilities for the first time in 30 years. That sounds awesome. So, here's going to go on. Here's going to go on. There's a lot of excitement and energy around the space. We own our space. So I think that's also something that's a little different. It's a piece of real estate that can stay in the neighborhood. And so much of Soho and that area that they now call Hudson Square, where we're located, has, the arts that used to be there is gone. So having like a foothold in that neighborhood, I think, is really important for New York City and the texture of New York City. Yeah. Spring
Street and Avenue of the Americas. Is that right? For those of you who don't know where it is located. I've got a lot of questions I wanted to ask, but let me go back to the aesthetic conversation. Let's talk vocabulary. In researching you and researching other people that I've brought on my show, the internet still uses the word avant-garde for theater. What do you think of avant-garde? Is avant-garde still a thing? I mean, you're a little bit more specific when you just say that you're alternative and multimedia, disciplinary and other kinds of theater. And you also, what you said was very interesting before about when you were doing environmental theater, which now is called immersive and interactive, or I don't know what. There's so many terms that float around, and sometimes we all get a little confused about it. What do you think? Where do you think we are in terms of new? I mean, what is new? Is anything new? Is anything innovative? Really tough. I know it's a very difficult question to answer, but I'm curious your thoughts on it.
I would start in on this with the word avant-garde. I don't think I ever talk about the avant-garde. That's just not the word.
It comes up all the
I use
time
to
in
talk about what we're
Wikipedia.
doing. It's a little, yeah. It's a little. It's so specifically dated in a certain way that I feel like it works against the idea of something new. And so that's not the language. And I think I actually, John Clancy, I'm pretty sure it was John who founded
John.
the first spring. He did he's the one I think who introduced this idea indie theater community versus off Broadway. That was another kind of
Right.
deadly label.
There was Martin Denton and John Clancy. It was a whole, and also my friend from Midtown International. Yeah, there was a whole group of people. I was actually part of that too.
That kind of that rebranding of it into like, I just remember him saying it's like indie theater, indie film is really cool, but off Broadway it sounds really horrible.
It sounds so far away from anything that we want to do. It's off Broadway.
It's the reference point of Broadway, which is not our reference point.
Right.
So I think that was really a helpful way to reframe how we talk about who we are and what we're doing.
So indie theater, that's we get a vote for indie theater. That's something that we can use when we're talking about what some of us are doing. Experimental is what's
we don't really use experimental either. I mean, I think of it as contemporary performance. That's the language that I use, because I think that can incorporate all disciplines: theater, music, dance, puppetry, media arts, and it can also speak about multidisciplinary, and it speaks about living artists. So I think about contemporary performance. That's the language that I use. And I try to actually eschew any specific discipline as a label, because a lot of artists that I know are making the work they're making, and they don't think of it like, oh, this is theater or this is music. It might be a music theater piece, and they're not distinguishing between those things. So I'm trying to use a broader term that expresses anything that the artist wants to use to tell the work, to bring the work to life. Yeah.
So the challenge in there is making an audience understand, so that they know what their expectations are when they're coming to it. We got somebody who just put the video on, so I'm gonna have to do that. What was did I just say before we got lost the screen?
An audience's expectation, I think, is what you mean.
Yeah. So basically, how do we frame it for an audience? How do we tell other people you want to come see this because this is what it is? I think people are used to traditional ways of looking at it, so it's hard. I think one of the challenges of doing things in a different way is finding audiences that will appreciate that and not be afraid of it. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean,
I've dumbfounded you.
Yeah, I think that within the indie theater community, there's it's kind of like, I know it when I see it. I feel like there is an audience for this work. We live in New York City, and it's a very sophisticated audience, and they're open to a lot of different things. That said, if you look at the totality of theater in this city, the vast majority is not what we're doing. The vast majority is more what people think of as theater, who come out of
well, narrative theater, linear theater,
yeah, character-based drama. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot
Um,
of us know, a lot of us are familiar working in that. I mean, you talk about
Right.
going away from dramaturgical structure. I I'm very attracted to dramaturgical structure, and I know how to teach people from a dramaturgical point of view. I think teaching people how to do what you guys are talking about is like, is that possible? They just have to do it. Are there rules?
I don't think so. Yeah, there's tons of rules, and I think dramaturgical rigor applies to all forms. And if you don't have dramaturgical rigor, then it's just random, and it's not very interesting for audiences to experience. So I think dramaturgical rigor is really important. And I think that artists get better in all different aspects of our field, whether they're early career, mid career, or late career. There's different strengths that they have at different times, and there are different muscles that they develop, and precision that they grow. So I think there's excellent things to be found in artists of all different aspects of their careers. But I do think that the training, I think there's a lot of training in university context for the type of work that we do. I think a lot of people have an experience of that in the university context, and then when they come out of school, it's harder for them to find the places to do that kind of work actually. But I think a lot of people are trained in the masters of experimentation, certainly like Mary Overly's viewpoints, which Anne Bogart developed further, like that's something that's taught in so many schools and people leave school with, or things, techniques from the living theater or the open theater. People are trained in this in all these different places and carry that out into the world with them. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Very helpful. I want to remind the room that we encourage you to put questions or comments in the chat. Let us know whether there's anything you want to know more about. Ross, are you there? Have there been any questions that we haven't taken yet? I haven't been following the chat as much.
None yet, except for
Lee Roscoe.
is Robert from Ohio?
Oh, is Robert from Ohio?
Yeah.
So Robert, are
Yeah,
you from
there's no-
Ohio?
no.
Oh, okay.
The brief, everyone asks, why is it called the Ohio Theater? And I'll tell the short story is Bill and Charles owned that building, and they bought it for nothing when nobody wanted it. But Charles was from Ohio, and he was getting homesick, and he was threatening to go back to Ohio. So Bill opened the theater and called it Ohio Theater so that Charles would feel less homesick and stay. And Charles did, in fact, stay, and they eventually married and were together for the rest of their lives. So I think of it as a little bit of a love story between Charles and Bill and Charles, but that's how it became the Ohio Theater.
I do see a question for Robert in the chat. Someone said, Robert, what theaters in Manhattan allow an extended run more than 4 weeks? And then how possible is it to create and open a theater in New York City? So that's for Robert.
You can have that, Kristin.
No.
I
Wrong, Robert. No, it's
Yeah.
you. I mean, I would never open the theater. I just, it's not my genetic makeup at all. I'll run a company. I'll run Theater Resources Unlimited, but the rigors of running a theater and opening up a theater just are a little bit beyond my scope, I think. I don't know, my interest maybe. So do you have any answers to that? Frederick, a couple things that I want to address for you. Extended run. The problem with an extended run is that when you rent a theater space, they have it available for a certain amount of time. You don't necessarily know whether they're going to be able to extend the run. You have to build that into your agreement with them when you take the space. So it's a gamble. You want to have it available for you like for 2 extra weeks or 4 extra weeks. It's not always going to be there. So extended runs in theater, a lot of the theaters that are 99 seats or fewer are basically what we call showcase theaters. Those are places where you're allowed to do an equity showcase, and it doesn't cost you $100,000. It just costs you $30,000 to $40,000 or $60,000. And in those theaters, you have to really look for the theater that's the right environment for your piece. Forget about whether you can run an extended run or not. I think it's very important to make sure you book yourself in the theater that is the right environment for the piece that you're doing and is accessible to the audience that you think is going to be interested in what you're doing. Yes, there are theaters that if you have enough money, you can do almost anything in this business, but it takes a lot of money to get a space, to give you a contract for their space that will let you come in for 4-week run and then maybe extend it and then extend it. It happens. It just has to coincide. You have to be lucky that nobody else wants that theater.
The struggle is that real estate is so expensive these days, and you can't afford to have the theater be empty. So you're not going to do it if somebody's not going to make the commitment. We have people sometimes who book our space who say, we want to do a 4-week run and we think we want to do a 2-week extension, but they pay for the 6 weeks. They're booking the 6 weeks. And if they don't end up using it, they don't end up using it, but they're paying us for the space, unless we made some kind of arrangement because we were partnering on the project or something. And for our own shows, that's another struggle, is like, you don't know that a show is going to garner the audience that will support this extension. And if you're paying artists, which we do, then you have to look at, can your weekly nut be met just by ticket sales? And for us, in most instances, it can't, because our theaters are small. Our little theater is 70 seats. Our theater upstairs is up to 150. So it's really hard to cover your costs with a 6-show week.
A lot of it is math. A lot of it's math, Frederick. It's just, you have to sit down and do the math. You know how many performances you are planning. You know what your ticket price can be. I mean, nobody tells you what your ticket price has to be anymore. I mean, equity stop saying that, but there's a ticket price that people are going to pay, and there's a ticket price that they may not pay. You have to basically make a judgment call on that, and then you have to talk about how much money you're going to make versus what you're spending the weekly nut that Kristin was talking about, what it's going to cost you every week to run your play. So a lot of it is just plain math. You have to sit down and figure out what is viable and what isn't. And then you have to find a space that is available and flexible and will let you do 4 weeks or 6 weeks, as long as you, as Kristin is saying, you have to pay for the 6 weeks. I would say, one place that you want to look at, Frederick, is the Players Theater. Michael Skouras. Look into the Players Theater, talk to them. They're usually flexible about bringing people into the space. They have actually programs where they actually sponsor people in their space too. And that's 160 seats. The only thing is, as Kristin also sort of advised, it's not easy to sell 160 seats. You don't want to do something in a 60-seat theater, but you can probably have a better chance at filling a 60-seat theater for a 4-week run than a 150-seat theater. It's just reality. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, of course. So, a lot to think about when you're going to produce yourself. A lot to think about. We have a workshop tomorrow about that. The other question,
it's just whether lightning strikes or not. Sometimes lightning strikes a show, and then you could sell it, you could run it. And when that happens, it's a beautiful thing. But it doesn't always happen, and it doesn't. Whether it happens or not is not a direct correlation to the quality of the work. It can be a lot of different factors that create that moment. So, it's a crazy business. That's just the way it is.
And I want to point out to everybody that Lee Roscoe asked the question, so what theaters who are doing fully written alternative experimental plays, what would they recommend? And Kristin suggested a couple companies. You might want to look into La Mama, The Tank, The Brick, The Flea. And you're saying that plays that have a particular interest in supporting women artists, WP Theater in New George's. So there are all these places. A lot of times I do talk to people who say, there's no place that I can submit my stuff to. Nobody's interested in what I do. And that's not true. You just have to find out what people are interested in.
I would also on this note though, the best way is actually go to the theaters that do the work that you like, and then find out who those people are. And that's another way of actually, get past the cold submission thing and go volunteer at a theater where people are doing work that you're interested in. and you'll start meeting people, and that's a very good way to actually do it. It's a longer commitment, but that's, you know, that's how you end up at the right place, working with the right people.
Yeah, I would love to hop in on a question I see in the chat about virtual reality and theater. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a perspective on that. We have a platform called youarehere.art, which we started post-pandemic because we did a bunch of stuff during the pandemic, and oops, I misspelled it. You are here. That's what happens when you talk and type at the same time.
So for those of you who have ambitions to be an usher, do go to usher.art.
Yes, now you've got it. So you are here. We started. It's just had its first year of beta. We have I don't know, 12 or 13 pieces on it. You can subscribe to it for $10 a month and have access to all the content on the site. And we put new content up every month. And we're doing a range of digital native commissions. So artists are creating work specifically for that platform and for that digital context. And then we have artists that we're showing archival work from here in the past, and then we're live streaming work. So we have and we're doing outdoor stuff too that we're supporting through that platform. So we have some audio walks from around the city that you can access through the platform and then go do on your own time. So we think of it as our third stage. Because we found during the pandemic that we were reaching people that we wouldn't have reached before. We were on 65 countries on 6 continents. We reached over 300,000 people during the pandemic with the digital content. So we wanted to kind of keep that party going and reaching that new range of people and folks. And I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's certainly a lot less interest than there was during the pandemic when people were trapped in their homes. But I do think that, you know, there are people with children, there are people with mobility issues. There's a lot of people that you can reach through the digital space that you wouldn't have otherwise. And then personally, as a director, there's a work I'm making that is with augmented reality, that is an outdoor work in the streets that's dealing with the unhoused. And it's been commissioned by Opera Omaha and San Diego Opera, and we'll do it in those cities first. And we were planning to bring it into New York City, but we don't have our New York City producer yet. But it's called Joan of the City, and it's for a group of audience members each meet their Joan in a location, and it's kind of Joan of Arc fighting against she's an unhoused person who's fighting against gentrification, the beast of gentrification. And the audience follows her in the streets, and the audience is wearing augmented reality glasses so they can see her visions and hear what she hears. So I'm super interested in it, and it presents a lot of challenges, and it's really exciting. And then we have some VR stuff that we're supporting in development also here. So yeah, we have a couple projects that we're growing that way right now that are meant to be live, but with VR, not necessarily for You Are Here, but then we also have stuff on You Are Here.
I have questions, but we're almost at 6:30. Do you both need to leave at 6:30? Because I can do that.
I actually do have a hard out. I'm going to see a show at 7.
Okay.
So
Okay. So then this would be the time for me to thank you. I was actually going to I want to have more of a conversation about dramaturgical rigor and how you apply that to pieces that we would call or maybe experience it as being less structured. But I'd love to know about that. When you said that, I was really, really intrigued. But I want to thank you both. Kristin, I've known you for a long time. I've actually watched here from the very beginning. I don't know if you know that I was around back then, but I was, and I was aware of you, and I was aware of Tiny Mythic. I think Tiny Mythic, some of you were part of TRU when we first started. And so I really feel like I have a long history with you, and I'm in awe of what you've done. I can't tell you how much respect I have for what you've done and what you've created. And you, Robert, it's wonderful to meet you. Also legendary and amazing and important to so many people, and to just basically to the vibrancy of New York City's culture. So I want to thank you both. I want to thank you for here. I want to thank you for New Ohio, and I want to thank you for you and for the work that you do and for your vision. And I'm going to take off. I'll be right back. I'm going to just say to everybody out there in YouTube land and those of you in podcast land who are new to us, we are, as you might have figured out by now, an arts service organization. We're not for profit. And we just try to help people navigate the business of theater in smarter ways and to hopefully be more successful at it. We do these things every week. I said this is 177th, I think, consecutive week. If you want to be in the room and if you want to meet the panelists and if you want to ask your own questions, I can make that happen. All you have to do is email me at trunltd@aol.com. That's trunltd@aol.com. And I'll make sure that you sent the link every week. And we do this as a community service. We've been doing it as a community service. We started out certainly as a community service. It's always been pay what you can. And we've had plenty of people who come here for free, and you're all welcome. But if you want to support us, and if you want to keep us strong and healthy and financially viable, consider making a donation. You can you can donate whatever you feel inclined to at trudonate.com. It's trudonate.com. That's basically a shortened URL that we redirect to our real URL, but you'll get there with trudonate.com. Join us next week. We have Sue Gilad and Larry Rogowski, who are going to talk about producing partnerships. The pluses and minuses, I think I forget what I call it. Let's call it something a little bit more eloquent than pluses and minuses, but we're going to talk about partnerships. And on Halloween weekend, we're going to talk about horror musical, the Frankenstein creature that we know as the horror musical, the mashup of the musical theater and horror, the horror film genre. That should be a fun conversation. I think it'll be a nice conversation to go into Halloween weekend with. And I've got almost all of November booked and part of December, and I'll be telling you more about that. Keep in touch with us. Join us every week, and you'll find us on truonline.org. So if you want to look up TRU and read more about what we're doing and see what our programs are, that's truonline.org. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks very much.
Good
Okay.
to meet you, Bob.
Bye-bye.
Nice meeting you. Thank you. Thank you.